great to have you back on the Kingdom Institute podcast. So good to have you. As we've now begun the transition out of what we called for many years our Unfair Advantage podcast into the Kingdom Institute podcast, the Lord dropped in me a few days ago the absolute necessity to take a few podcasts, a few episodes, and start renewing our minds on kingdom language. Kingdom language and your kingdom come is very often much different than what we've been taught in a church or what we've been taught in traditional business, particularly in the Western societies in the world, of what business looks like, what marketplace dynamics that we are supposed to follow. And many of them are really not kingdom principles, not kingdom ways. Years ago, when I was a younger man and I studied communication, the Lord brought me into the field of human communication, and I earned a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in speech communication, looking at language, looking at giving everything from speeches to human communication, intercultural communication, small group dynamics, all of that. The reason I was led into a study, and it continues today, of lifelong language is that I was stunned as a young man to see how easy the use of words, the use of language could persuade men and women to do even really stupid things, even up to suicides. There was a time in the late 60s, there were groups that actually had small little groups of men and women, cults, that the leaders of those cults were able to persuade through language mass suicide. The entire cult just one day drank poison and died. I said, I want to understand a little bit more how easy it is, and it is incredibly easy to come away with the wrong mindsets, come away with the wrong language sets in the way that we do our lives, even do our church lives, and particularly even do our business lives. So we're going to take a few weeks, and the Lord's giving me 4 or 5 key thoughts, key concepts, kingdom thoughts. And we're going to dive deep into these. And what I pray is that as I go through this teaching, I'm viewing this as if we're in a small group or in a small room in a classroom. And I'm teaching some fresh concepts to help you rethink, reshape, relook, and perhaps renew your mind on what kingdom business looks like. Your kingdom come, your will be done. And as we lay these foundations of key thoughts, key phrases, I pray that you will walk away and say, wait a minute, I've got a completely new and fresh way to look at what I do so that His will be done through me in my marketplace, in my company, in my city, in my country, to transform nations so that His kingdom will come and create sheep nations. That's going to be one of the teachings in a couple of weeks. So, for the next few weeks, kingdom language. And to me, the single most important word, one word, one concept, one word that we need to look at, that we need to begin with, is the word Eklessia. Eklessia. Many of you may already be ready or are already familiar with this concept, this phrase, Eklessia. I want to share with you the original meaning of this concept of Eklessia and how then it became a misrepresented, actually, in one translation of the Bible that is still very, very popular, and then what we can do to activate more of an Eklessia mindset for us today. So let's look at this word Eklessia. I'm going to pick just one of the New Testament verses out of Jesus' mouth Himself when He used the word Eklessia. And it's Matthew 16:18. I want to read Matthew 16:18. And this is the New King James Version. Good version. The setting on Matthew 16:18, when the Lord uses the word Eklessia, He has taken His disciples to the very northern part of Israel. This is His trek north before they head south into His death, burial, and resurrection. So they're coming in to the northern part of the kingdom. Jesus had some very specific teachings. He wanted to physically show them something before He came back for the Passion Week, before they walked back into Jerusalem. At this place in northern Israel where Jesus spoke these words, I've been there. I've got pictures of it. And it was profoundly impactful on me standing in the place where Jesus said these words. And also I say to you that you, Peter, Matthew 16:18, that you, Peter, and on this rock, he was talking about himself, Jesus, on this rock I will build my church. The word actually there is Eklessia. Jesus used the Greek word Eklessia, not synagogue, not temple, not traditional church. He said, and on this rock I will build my Eklessia, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The gates of hell cannot prevail against it. When he said gates of hell, he pointed to a mountainside where they were standing. This particular area of Israel in the time that Jesus lived 2,000 years ago was the most evil, the most demonic piece of ground in all of Israel. And the disciples knew it. Jews did not travel to this part unless they were already under the influence of Baal and demons and really serving Baal. This particular mountainside, on the left side, as you're looking north, on the left side has a huge cave, where annually Jews who lived in that and was under the influence of demons would call out and ask for the demons to come out, the Baal demon to come out of the cave, present himself, and move back. That meant in this demonic worship that these men and women would be blessed by the demon Baal. Also on this mountain were cutouts in the mountain. There were arched cutouts. And within these many cutouts, there were a dozen or maybe 20 or more. They would put gods, evil spirits, and they would come and worship these evil spirits, these statues, if you will. Also at this property, and for those of us in business, particularly in North America, you'll really appreciate this. There was a bull, literally a huge carved out bull, life-size, maybe bigger than life-size. And that mouth of the bull is where Jews, even in Jesus' time, would come and sacrifice their newborn babies, the blood sacrifice that Satan requires, that still to this day requires the blood. That mouth of that bull was always on, had a fire in it, and you would come and sacrifice your newborn children to the evil gods of Baal and Satan. In fact, on a side note, business people, that same bull identically is represented in downtown New York City on Wall Street. That is the Wall Street bull. You take that bull, open its mouth. That was an exact representation of what these disciples saw as they traveled to what he called, in that area of northern Israel, was called the gates of hell. He pointed to, and the gates of hell, and what he was pointing to was all of the Baal worship, all of the demonic, all of the spiritual activity, all of the people worshiping false gods and sacrificing their babies. So get this picture. Jesus has taken his disciples before they head to Jerusalem for his crucifixion, and he took them and said, on Peter, on this rock, on Jesus himself, I will build my Eklessia, a Greek word, and the gates of hell, pointing to that mountain, shall not prevail. Now, it's critical that we understand this concept of Eklessia and how the traditional church has gotten away from using this concept, the language, the concept. Let me give you the definition of Eklessia, the original definition. It's a Greek word that the Romans maintained. It's a Greek word based upon how Greek society was run. Then the Roman Empire grew from it, and they said, yeah, we're going to continue this Eklessia phrase because this is the way that we want to run and make everybody bow to now our government, from what the Greeks said, Eklessia, how they ran their government. The definitions of Eklessia, I've got 2 or 3 that we'll share with you. This is critically important for us to grasp, so I'm going to take my time. Lord, lead me. The Eklessia is a gathering of citizens called out from their homes into some public area, public assembly, not a church, not a temple, not a synagogue. Eklessia or in that case, men being called out. In that case, men were the leaders of society in a public assembly. It was an assembly of people convened at a public place of the council for the purpose of deliberating. Well, what were they deliberating? In secular Greek language, this ekklesia, this formal assembly, was a place that free male citizens, get this, debated and voted on laws, war, and policy. Ekklesia was a called out group, not just a separate church where we hang out in a church in the four walls of the church and that's, we're the Ekklesia, we're the church. No. The original definition of Ekklesia from Greek itself that the Romans maintained, and every one of those disciples knew when Jesus said, I will build my Ekklesia, he was talking about building his government of how the laws, the war, the policy, the government is upon the shoulders of Jesus. On his shoulder is the government. Let's get away from considering this just the church, the traditional westernized view of church. It was not a religious term. Ekklesia was not a religious term. It was a political and a civic term. And in fact, one of the ways that you can go back in the Old Testament, don't have time to share all of them, but one primary example that pops up to me all the time when I think about this is in Proverbs 31, the last chapter of Proverbs. Proverbs 31, the righteous woman, the just woman, and this is a godly woman as was described by Solomon in Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31:23, that verse reads, her husband, many of you may remember, there was a verse about this virtuous woman's husband. Her husband is known in the gates where he sits among the elders of the land. Do you know what those gates mean? The Ekklesia. He was not sitting outside, the church and determining church things. He was not sitting by the temple and saying temple things. What he was doing was sitting outside, and he was doing exactly what the Ekklesia did in Greek times: policy, civic, marketplace, laws, governing trade, governing money exchanges. That was the Ekklesia. That they were, and I want to say it again, I want us to get this, that the Ekklesia was how society was run. Not how the church was run, how society was run. And society was run outside of the church. That's the Ekklesia. Now reflect on this for just a second, as I've given you maybe more than you've ever heard about this phrase of Ekklesia. Think about Jesus' disciples. Think about Jesus' disciples. Who were they? They were businessmen. They were tax collectors. They were not priests. They were not leaders of the synagogue. They were not Levites taking care of the temple. They were marketplace dudes, as we say in Western U.S., here in the U.S. Western. We were dudes. We were marketplace dudes. They were for-profit businessmen, or at least in Matthew's case, he was taking incredible taxes. He was represented the evil government of that time and taking money of hardworking Jews all across Israel. They were marketplace people. So when Jesus said, I will build my Ekklesia, the society, how government, how we are going to rule and reign in righteousness and justice, they knew exactly he meant, my goodness, this is not about a church. This was about ruling a society. Obviously, some of the disciples then said, well, this is why Jesus came, to overthrow Rome so that we can have a new David, if you will, a new David king, a human king on a throne. Well, we know that's not what Jesus meant. Now, realizing now that the Ekklesia is a called out group, in that case of men, on how society, how government, how business, how everything, commerce was going to be run, let me share with you how this has been unfortunately misrepresented and where the misrepresentation of Ekklesia began. And I just want you to be aware of it. I'm not calling out the King James Version of the Bible, but let me share with you how this concept, the original meaning of Ekklesia, has gotten foggy, has gotten misconstrued. King James gave, back in the 1600s, gave his translators, the King of England, gave his translators 15 rules. And one of the rules, rule number 3, basically said, implied within the rule, I'm not going to go into the detail of how the language he used in the rule, but what that rule did was, in effect, he said, I want you to remove Eklessia, this concept of outside of a church. And I want you to replace, every time in the New Testament Ekklesia appeared, the Greek word Eklessia in the New Testament, you change it to church. Meaning King James was creating the Church of England. He wanted to reinforce the Church of England, a government-dictated, mandated church. Get rid of that called out from the church to rule society. No, I want them to be within the church, if you will. And get this, the Greek word Eklessia appears 115 times in the New Testament. 115 times. 112 times that original Eklessia was changed to church. Only three times, all in Acts 19 did it refer to a non-Christian group. So remember, the vast majority of the times, even in the New Testament, the concept of Eklessia was written about, it really meant this societal governing that gives us great pause and step back to say, wait a minute, we are called out, get this, we are called out to attack the gates of hell. Jesus said, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. I'm speaking about how societies, how governments, how cities and countries are run. We're talking about politics, if you will. I just suggest in my own, the way that I help myself deal with politics. Oh, politics are so evil. Politics are evil. They're terrible. Yeah. At least in America, politics is simply Satan's transformation of what was good into bad. It's just Satan's way of taking something very good and polluting it. It's government polluted. That's what politics is Jesus' government polluted. So when you think of politics, oh, we got to stay out of politics. We're not supposed to be in politics. No, you're supposed to be the political leaders. You're supposed to attack the gates of hell. And we focus primarily in business, not so much in government, but we're having governments reach out to us, believe it or not. We are to attack the gates of hell, and they cannot stop the move of the Eklessia when we get out of our church, where we are supposed to be equipped and edified and taught how to rule and reign righteously in society. That's what the church does, is help build up the called out ones to move into societies and transform societies to the rule and reign of Jesus through the power of Holy Spirit. That's what we're called to do. And Jesus said the gates of hell are not going to stop us. When you think of medieval times, think back, and maybe you're like me, maybe you've had a chance to see in your life some movies where medieval castles, be it in England or Germany or Europe or wherever it might be, even Old Testament times, cities have gates. You know, Jerusalem has 12 gates. And those are the most vulnerable places for an attacking army to break into the city. You're not going to break through the big walls necessarily in those days. In those days, you attacked the gates, and you would see the big ramrods coming in. And as soon as that gate was open, then the enemies could march in and attack. That's what we're to do. Satan puts up gates. He puts up gates of where he has influence. And those gates are the ones that we are supposed to attack. And let me share with you boldly what those gates are. Satan now, even Jesus said that Satan is still the ruler of this world. Even Jesus said that 2,000 years ago. And unfortunately, he still is. He is the negative political Eklessia primarily running the world in many ways. Now think about it. There are, if you will, 7 primary gates. Some call mountains, some call spheres of influence, but every society has 7 big pockets of how that society is run. And we have many people like Johnny Enlow and Lance Wallnau and so many people that have done an incredible job of teaching us how these 7 spheres of influence, these 7 pieces of society work and operate. Religion, the faith mountain, the economic business mountain, the government mountain, the family mountain, the arts and entertainment mountain, all the 7 mountains that we are to attack. Those are gates, and those gates are at the top of these spheres of influence. We're seeing it right now. These gates are being attacked in government around the world. Little by little, they're being chipped at, and the enemy does not want to give up what he already has. And like I said a couple of podcasts ago, that Satan tempted Jesus. The final temptation were these types of kingdoms. I'll give you back the right to rule over families. I'll give you the right to rule back over governments if you bow to me and do it my way. I have my puppets, my satanic, and they don't even know it many times, puppets ruling these countries, these cities, and many often the very people in business that we compete against. They don't even know it, but they're being run by evil influences. This concept of Eklessia, I simply wanted to plant this within you, that even Jesus himself, and 112 times in the New Testament, when we see the word church, it's very likely that's Eklessia. So we need to renew our minds as to what the church that Jesus was talking about really was meant to do. The church was get out there, go in, walk into societies, walk into businesses, walk into governments, and transform the way they think, to transform the way they do business. You have the right. You have the keys to the kingdom. I've given you the keys to the kingdom. And in fact, get this. I'm going to go back to the verse that I opened up with, just the one example. In northern Israel, when Jesus had his disciples, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. Verse 18 of Matthew 16, Jesus says, "And I also say to you, Peter, that on this rock," Jesus, "I will build my Eklessia, and the gates of hell shall not prevail." The next verse, the next sentence out of Jesus' mouth, the gates of hell shall not prevail. I will give you, just a few weeks after this, after he died and was resurrected, the power of Holy Spirit, the full power of Holy Spirit, the same Spirit that lived in Jesus at that time, he was going to bring at Pentecost. He said, "And I will give you the keys to the kingdom," right after the Eklessia, my Eklessia. Hell can't stop it. "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will already have been loosed in heaven." So he follows it up. Those gates of hell are not going to win, because I'm going to give you the power. The power. And those of you who've been following with me for a while, and if you haven't followed me, everything we do at the Kingdom Institute is to help teach God's people your unfair advantage in business and all the spiritual power it includes. And we'll be doing far more teachings on everything we've talked about, binding and loosing and the spiritual gifts. We're going to be speaking much more on that as we move forward into the Kingdom Institute. Ekklesia. We are the Ekklesia. I'm speaking to business people literally around the world. And over the last few weeks, we've shared that this podcast is reaching 42 nations all across the world, from Europe and Northern Africa, all the way through India, Pakistan, South Korea, Vietnam, all over the world, Australia. This is already a global business media network. And we're going to continue to keep growing that. This is for business people. The Eklessia that Jesus said, we are the ones to attack the gates. So I just want to conclude with an encouragement for you. Let me give you an assignment, some activation. As you read the New Testament, just keep this in the back of your mind and embed this in your spirit. I'm exhorting you, I'm encouraging you. When you read the New Testament and see the word church, think Eklessia. Does it fit? Eklessia. Does that fit in this context? 112 times in the New Testament it does. 3 times in Acts it's the church. So number one, just help renew your mind. Start thinking Eklessia. Eklessia. The gates of hell cannot stop me what I'm doing in my business as I attack the gates of hell that are trying to stop me in my kingdom-driven business. So remember, Eklessia, Eklessia, Eklessia. And here's the last thing I'll share on this podcast about Eklessia as an activation. Number one, think Eklessia. As you read the New Testament, think Eklessia. Number two, boldly ask God. Boldly go to the throne room and ask Jesus and ask God through Holy Spirit, the power of Holy Spirit, to help clarify your assignment now with this fresh revelation on Eklessia. Ask Him to clarify. I've got a new revelation. I've just received this from your servant, Jim, from your co-laborer, Jim, from your teacher, Jim. I have a new revelation in Eklessia. Help refine for me what that means and the gates that I am to attack. Give me fresh revelation on my assignment as a member of your Eklessia. You will receive revelation from the Lord on this, I promise you. So I thank you for sticking with us through this podcast of a teaching. We've got several more on key phrases, key words, on what it means to think like kingdom, to think like a king in the kingdom. Your kingdom come, your will be done. So join us as we continue over the next few podcasts, over the next few episodes. I encourage you, please share this. Please like this. Please comment. The best way for this to get around the world, to multiply the impact of what God has given us at the Kingdom Institute, our assignment, is for you to share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues. I thank you for doing that in advance. If there's anything we can do, anything we can pray with you over, anything that you would like for us to teach on here at the Kingdom Institute, email me at hello@drjimharris.com. hello@drjimharris.com. We'll take all of these in, and we'll see where the Lord wants us to go in future teachings. For the next few weeks, some kingdom language. Hope you enjoyed today, and we'll see you next week on the Kingdom Institute podcast. Thank you for watching the Kingdom Institute podcast. Please follow, like, and share this podcast with all of your friends across all of your social media channels. Thank you.